Welcome to ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Reuben Abati, and ThisDayLive begins now. I'd like to welcome today's panelists. First, Professor Bola Akinterinwa, Director General, Bola Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies.
Thank you.
Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough.
Thank you.
Then, of course, Wale Olaleye, Deputy Editor, Sunday This Day.
Good afternoon, sir.
And joining us later will be Ayo Teriba, CEO, Economic Associates. Today, we'll be discussing the stories that made headlines in Africa last week. On Thursday, Cyril Ramaphosa was sworn in as South Africa's fifth democratically elected president, following President Jacob Zuma's resignation after a hard fight with his party, the African National Congress, to step down or face a vote of no confidence. Ramaphosa was the only candidate nominated in parliament, so no vote was needed to make him president. In a televised statement, Zuma said he was quitting with immediate effect, but said he disagreed with his party's decision. In his inauguration speech, Ramaphosa pledged to crack down on corruption and improve South Africa's economy. Now, new development in South Africa. Some people say it's even a new beginning, even if the new president is to serve out the remaining part of Jacob Zuma's tenure. And if he then decides to run for the presidency, then it will be another opportunity for him. But a lot of people in Nigeria have been saying this is a very significant development. Prof, could this have happened in Nigeria?
Under normal circumstances, yes. But the circumstances in Nigeria are never normal. In South Africa, what has come to play is that the political party, the ANC, the African National Congress, has shown discipline, has shown that there is always a limit to the tolerance of politicians. Zuma had been accused of many things, more than 900 accusations. Now it came to a point that the ANC wouldn't want to be on record to be condoning, and yet the ANC would still want a soft landing for Zuma. So this time he decided to actually put a full stop to all this. So in this case, in Nigeria, the political parties are not on record and they are not visible to be interested in doing what is correct. Where they are all also condoning in all ramifications corruption. And in this case, for instance, if you take a look at the happenings within the framework of Nigeria, many are the examples. What are the political parties doing about that? So I think that to give a concrete answer to your question, it wouldn't have happened in Nigeria.
Well, I mean, perhaps maybe the issue is one of the quality of institutions, not necessarily the quality of individuals. What do you think, Yemi?
I think part of it is also the system of government.
Absolutely.
I mean, Nigeria has not, for example, successfully recalled any member of the National Assembly. And in a sense, we can say what has happened in South Africa if we're looking continent-wide, starting from Thabo Mbeki, who actually there was a vote for him, not just resignation.
Yeah.
That's almost a similar case in a sense of being recalled.
Correct.
And what Zuma did was sort of preemptive. I mean, it's a recall in a sense because he was forced to respond to what would, in a sense, would have been a vote of no confidence. So coming to Nigeria, I think our system of government doesn't really force that. And so the parties, in a sense, don't have the power. They can say they have no confidence in you, but they really can't pull you away. So constituents can do that for legal.
And when you're a president in Nigeria, you are treated almost like a mini god.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly. Unless they get impeached. But I mean, under circumstances, we have forced presidents to step aside. And I think OBJ's third-term agenda for me would be an example of a forced step aside, because that didn't pass. Excuse me. And IBB, in a sense, was also forced, even though military rule, but in a sense, a forced step aside.
Well, we have seen instances of people's revolution, more or less, if you may use that phrase, in Nigeria. But for a political party to be so well organized as to be able to, stop a candidate and say you can no longer represent us, I think we still have a lot to do in that direction.
Actually, let me even just piggyback on that in the context of recall. If you look at the senator representing Kogi West in Nigeria, his party has divided into two, with one side of the party saying that you are our son in whom we are well pleased, and the other faction of the party being quite quiet in the whole process of a recall. So even at that level...
Except that is slightly different. There's also the issue of personality clash between the gentleman and the governor.
Deeply political. But my point about the party is that the party should, to your point about institutions, there should be no reason why a party, in one side of a party, will actually issue a statement on behalf of the party saying we support you, while there's another faction that's saying, well, if the process is a recall, go through it. So to your point about institutions and where we are...
Wale, Ramaphosa was part of the Zuma presidency. He was deputy president. In spite of the excitement that his emergence has generated, do you think all that talk about a new beginning, fighting corruption, you think he can do it? After all, he was part of the system.
And I had my reservations all along, but I'm a product of many chances, so I'd like to accord him one. And let's just see how far it goes. I was just a little bit disappointed that Zuma would try to fight this. I mean, you should have known that he lost it the moment Ramaphosa emerged leader of the party. I mean, I would have thought that he would have resigned on his own without being pushed to that point. That notwithstanding, I can't see much coming from Ramaphosa, especially that he cannot be completely exonerated from whatever Zuma is being accused of. And unfortunately for Zuma too, all he's done, all his achievements have all been consumed by this allegation of corruption. So nothing in terms of development and governance, are on the front burner, or rather on the table as far as the debate is concerned. But again, like I said earlier, let's just accord him some benefit. Let's see how far he pushes through.
And also, if he wants to come back, he has 1 year to sort of prove what he's worth.
Can't do no shit in 1 year. I'm sorry.
Well, there are talks already about him, rejigging the cabinet and the kind of move he makes.
He can't
probably
do
give indications.
in 1 year.
He might not do fundamental things, but parts, and then we talk about that within the context of Nigeria as well. There's some quick wins that actually show, there's a word for it, which is escaping.
That's a famous Nigerian
phrase. But there's a phrase for it that escapes me at the moment. Fruits, exactly. But there's something that you can do to show that this is what I am made of and this is what I'm willing to do. So even in the 1 year, maybe not sort of structural fundamental things, but maybe 1 or 2 heads can roll, that people will be like, oh, he did that. And then sort of instill faith that, okay, maybe he can do more.
And in context of the comparison we had with Nigeria, apart from the system of government that you mentioned, I also think ideology was also key. All our political parties are lacking ideology, nothing, zero.
But you see, Prof, something seems to be happening in Africa. In Gambia, we saw how, Yahya Jammeh made his exit because the people were rebelled. The same thing in Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe. Now it's the turn of the man in South Africa. In fact, it's so ironic because South Africa, Jacob Zuma, was part of the negotiators for Robert Mugabe's exit, not knowing that his own turn will come. And I've seen comments. People are saying this should happen, around Africa so that all the problematic African leaders can be shown the way
Togo
out.
as well. There's an ongoing one in Togo. Is it Togo?
Yeah, and in Ethiopia, the Prime Minister, Haile Mariam Desalegn, also resigned as a result of pressure.
Yes, you are.
Is it a good development, or you think these leaders are being hounded?
It is a good development, but we can also look at it negatively.
Really?
You see, the beauty of it all is that democracy in Africa has its own peculiarities. And that's what we are simply witnessing in all the examples you have given. What is happening now is that the African Union has said that under no circumstance will there be any regime change, all right, by use of force, meaning that any manu military manner or coup making or coup d'etat will no longer be tolerated. Now, what is happening is that we are no longer witnessing coup making.
It's true.
All right? So, coup making is now being replaced by, mountain of prayer on leaders to resign. Now, the mountain of prayer.
An Arab Spring of sorts.
Civil.
Coming down
And it's
south.
civil, actually.
Well,
It's civil and
yes.
commendable, I would say.
But it may not be civil. If you look at the case of
Mugabe.
Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
all right, it was the military.
Yeah, but they had
It
the
was
backing of the
military-
people,
Oh, they had-
which
Yes,
gave
yes.
the action
Or the
legitimacy.
people, led, forced in a sense, not forced, but I would say the people led it. And the military said, you know what, we can ride on this and we'll know we'll have support
No,
from the
Yemi,
people.
Yemi, you see, I started with the argument of the African Union. You can only change an elected government by another election. They don't want any other subject.
These rules are not cast in stone.
But
What else happened in this?
So, I mean, Mugabe had to be pushed out. Sad enough.
I think what we're dealing with here is a question of legitimacy.
Yes.
And a leader can lose legitimacy in many
Anytime.
ways.
Yes.
And when you lose legitimacy, your continued stay in office
illegal.
becomes untenable.
Yeah.
And in Zuma's case, he saw very clearly, that all the chickens came home to roost, and he just had to
And
go.
it took 9 years. It was, I think it was really trying to wait.
But I get your point.
I see his points too, but again, we've got to move on. Prof.
Initially, he didn't want to accept
Of course.
until it was evident.
Yeah, that he was gone.
Precisely.
But do you see the possibility of Jacob Zuma being tried for some of the allegations
At least
of
this
corruption?
is more of a soft
I
landing
don't think so.
for
I
him.
don't think so.
Who is going to
Some
try?
kind of negotiation must have gone on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who tried Robert Mugabe?
Anyway,
Not even Ramaphosa.
In the
Mugabe's
Democrat-
non-trial was upfront. Everybody
It was
clear
negotiated,
that
yeah.
It was not individual.
anyway, now
In the
that
Democratic Republic of Congo, the people are already asking Joseph Kabila to resign.
yes, they've been at it for a while because he wants to sit tight. And also in Togo, the people are saying we are tired of the dynasty. And also in Cameroon, the English-speaking part of Cameroon is also rebelling.
And in Nigeria.
Let's go to Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, we've had the report of the death of 65-year-old opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai. He died on Wednesday evening in Johannesburg after battling cancer for 2 years. Tsvangirai was the rival of ousted President Robert Mugabe. His long struggle as his main challenger was credited with helping to keep a measure of democratic space open in Zimbabwe. What does his death mean for Zimbabwe at this critical point of the country's transition? Because already there are fears that the quality of opposition that you now get in Zimbabwe may not be that strong, and fears also that the party that he led, the Movement for Democratic Change, could break up because he was really the rallying figure.
There's no way you talk about the political and democratic evolution in contemporary times of Zimbabwe and then you rule out completely the roles played by...
He was even
Tsvangirai,
Prime Minister.
Prime
at the
Minister,
point.
yes, when they shared unity government.
Yes.
Like I discussed with some people, I think it's left very big shoes in terms of opposition politics in the country. And it will be, I don't see somebody taking his role so soon because he was resolute, he was confident, he was irresistible, irrepressible. He was everywhere, and he played it to the fullest until he passed on.
Well, he was originally a member of the ZANU-PF.
Yes, absolutely. And
Before
then
he
he
moved
had to,
out,
yes, because that gave him a very good vantage position to understudy the other party and then pose a very viable opposition, which he did, considerably. I think he played his role, he did his part, and he's left the shoes for the country to deal with.
Well, Prof, we're not just talking about Monga Tsvangirai, we're also talking about opposition politics. What's your assessment of opposition politics in Africa? We've seen it in Kenya, we've seen it elsewhere. We've seen it also in Nigeria.
Your question compels me to disagree with him in part.
Okay.
You see, as much as I want to agree with him that Morgan left
ZANU-PF.
yes, You see, the opposition parties in Zimbabwe, they are more developed than opposition parties in Nigeria or elsewhere. Opposition is quite institutionalized in Zimbabwe.
The fight has been
Precisely, to the extent that whenever the leader, and whoever is the leader, when it's not there, the ideological stand that is upheld will compel whoever assumes leadership of the opposition. So in this case, I will agree with you 50%. The other 50% is to say that, look, it's just change in continuity. When we look at Africa in its general context, we can say there is a development in terms of acquisition of democratic culture, all right, quest for freedom, and so on and so forth. However, the impact of extra African influence cannot be ruled out. In all these cases, when you see an opposition party militating against the factor of incumbency all along, it is simply because, yes, precisely, it's simply because the external factor is there. You take a look at Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, right from 1980 until the resignation of Reuben Mugabe, Great Britain has always been, right, and the stiff neck of the Zimbabwean leadership, all right? When Reuben Mugabe left, now Britain can sleep with the two eyes closed, and all of them. Now, Europeans will begin to look at his successor, whether he will be another Reuben Mugabe. Exactly the same pattern now. Whoever is going to be the new opposition leader, we must seek an understanding of the opposition politics from the perspective of extra Zimbabwean factors.
But beyond that, I think you're also leaving out the fact that the individual too plays a part, a major part. The capacity of the individual to drive it, the gravitas to drive it is key. An idiot cannot drive an opposition cause.
You are right.
So, yeah. That's where he comes in as a major factor. As an
Considering
individual.
the humiliation that they went through,
everything,
the brutalization,
attempts,
the harassment.
He is rugged. He fits the bill.
That's why I considered 50% to you on that. I am saying that, look, at the end of the day, in Africa and in African politics, please, most of the opposition parties are funded externally.
Well,
right?
we may not have hard facts on that.
I can't speak for Nigeria.
Yemi, you want to have the last word on this?
No, I mean, what I would agree with Prof. on is that because our culture of democracy is relatively new, the culture of opposition politics, because we've presented democracy as a winner takes all. So there's really almost no incentive to... So when somebody is in power, everybody finds a way to sort of align. Correct. So that constant, which is I think the point Olawale was making, that Morgan was consistent. Once he went into opposition, he sort of stayed the course and wasn't about, I mean, he forced the sharing of power, but he wasn't trying to get a piece of the national cake so I could be among. But I think that's the culture that we've seen in a lot of the continent. So as our democracy...
When he was in power, Great Britain supported him actively. When he was in opposition leader.
Anyway, may his soul rest in peace. And what is important at the end of the day is the stability of Zimbabwe as the country moves forward on all fronts, and also the happiness and the welfare
is saying they won't give him
of the people
hero status. That's not nice. I think he deserves it.
Anyway, it's time now for a short break here on ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show. But do stay tuned. When we return, we'll be talking about the mysterious snake that swallowed Jam's 36 million in Benue State. Don't go away. Welcome back to ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Last week, a story broke that a mysterious snake has swallowed over 36 million belonging to the Benue State office of the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board JAMB in Makurdi, Nigeria. This was revealed following an interrogation by a team of JAMB auditors of a sales clerk when she could not account for the money generated before the abolition of scratch cards. The clerk confessed that her housemaid connived with another JAMB staff to spiritually steal the money from the vault in the accounts office. Joining us now to discuss this subject from our Abuja studio is the Public Relations Officer of JAMB, Dr. Fabian Benjamin. Dr. Benjamin. Dr. Benjamin?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Dr. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, thank you very much for joining us on ThisDayLive. If you've been following the program, you must have had me providing an introduction. What exactly is the situation about this mysterious snake?
Well, let me start by saying that this incident happened long ago before the present registrar assumed duty in JAMB. And upon assumption, he was given a marching order to ensure that the board is cleansed of all form of infractions. Every administration has a mandate. And we know that the mandate of this administration, right from presidency, is anti-corruption. When Professor Olaleye assumed duty, he felt that the regime of scratch card was shrouded with a lot of corruption. Staff were being exposed to a lot of cash and were tempted, and some of them were helping themselves with public funds. And he stopped the use of scratch card. Upon the stoppage, it was only natural that an inventory be taken of what was sold and what is remaining. It is through this comprehensive audit that these discoveries were made. And this staff in question, she's not the only one, but this particular staff in question allege or claim that a mysterious snake, each time she keeps this money, the snake comes and swallows the money. Of course, we don't believe that. And she has been subjected to all the necessary public service disciplinary procedures. And a committee was set, disciplinary committee was set. She appeared before the committee. A report has been written to the minister, and the board is awaiting the report to take further step. But let me make it abundantly clear that in any system, JAMB is 40 years this February, and it's only natural that if you have a house that has been built for the past 40 years, you must do some reconstruction, fixing here and there. We've been fortunate to have very sound registrars from Angulu was the first registrar up to the last registrar, and today Professor Isaac Oloide. Very renowned scholars who have contributed tremendously to the growth of the board, taking the board to where it is today. But Professor Oloide has come, and his mandate is that, look, clean this system, make it one of the best internationally. The landscape of public examination is global. It's not only in Nigeria. When we go out for peer review, we compare notes. And that is why we are not ashamed, or some would have felt that why allow this kind of story to go out? But we are not looking at it that way. It is only a madman that will say, look, I want to reconstruct my house that I've built for 40 years. And then you wouldn't want your neighbor to see you carrying debris out.
If you could hold on 1 second. You said earlier on that it's not just the issue of the snake. I read that there is another person who said that some significant amount was taken from him by the Boko Haram, something like that. And somebody else confessed that they just shared the money to alleviate poverty in the office. What is likely to happen to these people? Have they been handed over to the police?
The board has a staff strength of about 2,000 staff, and very committed, dedicated staff who are working round the clock to ensure that at least they deliver on the mandate of the present regime. They are less than 10% of the total staff of the board. In fact, sorry, less than 1%, because they're not even up to 10. We have one of them who alleged that he borrowed the money out and to his colleagues and stuff like that. There was even one that alleged that because of the crisis in the Northeast, he could not account for the money. There was one that even went as far as slicing papers and putting in a carton and submitting as a scratch card, unused scratch card. This is quite unfortunate, but they will meant to face the law, and whatever is done to them, we are looking at it as an act that will serve as deterrent to others.
So Fabian, don't go yet. I have a panel here with me in Lagos, and they may like to ask you one or two questions. Prof, do you have any question for Dr. Fabian Benjamin, JAM PRO, joining us from Abuja?
Yes, thank you, Fabian. Your submission, your explanation is quite interesting. But to look at the explanation you are giving is more of rationalization. How do you explain the fact that someone is claiming the argument of a snake swallowing the money? Another one is saying the money...
No, he already said you don't believe these stories.
No, I'm coming. Yes, okay. He said that. You see, I can put the question this way. In which way is the mystery of a snake, mystery of a snake, given as an argument? In a period, 40 years of existence of the JAMB, and another one would have given the money on loan to others to assist. Question of poverty. Then Boko Haram factor. Is that not a reflection of what actually exists generally in the civil and public service? Because it's not just the JAMB.
Well, Prof, I take that as a comment.
I speak for JAM, and I wouldn't want to begin to speak for the entire public service. But what we are doing in JAM, one of our aim is to ensure that we set the pace. We want to reform governance so that other agencies can also look inwards and begin to see how they can also position themselves to what is happening in JAM. Yes, in the last regime, you know, technology is something that develops every day, involves every day. And when the scratch card thing came, at that time, we felt it was just the best thing that had happened to JAM. But over time, it was discovered, especially with the coming of Professor Olaleye, it was discovered that there were a lot of loopholes. And when he came on board, being a man that is so versatile in the area of technology, he felt that one of the things that he would want to achieve is ensure that he block all the loopholes that funds, public funds, you know, are being siphoned. And you see, when people are exposed to cash, in fighting corruption, there are certain things that you must put in place. Like now, going forward, it is impossible for any staff of the board to be exposed to even 100 naira or 50 naira. All our services, all services that we provide to the public now, for you to access them, you must pay through our TSA account before you can even get to the point of asking for such services. So nobody is exposed to any 1 naira for him to be tempted, for you to say you've borrowed it out, or for even staff to come and meet you and begin to ask for one form of loan from here and there. So I am not speaking for the entire public service, but I believe that what we are doing, because we don't see ourselves, we don't limit ourselves to the scope of this country. As a public examination, our examination, we do other services that requires us interfacing with international bodies. We are, in fact, the only body we want to compare ourselves with is the UCAS in UK. That's the kind of model that we want to transform to. And we believe that in the next few years, even exam malpractice, which has been one of the headaches of public examination globally, even exam malpractice in Nigeria, when we talk about JAM, in the next few years, we should be able to eradicate to a reasonable level incidents of examination malpractice.
Take the next question so that we can cover more ground. Yemi?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend the TSA. I think TSA has quite helped in collecting this money, so they're not available for borrowing. But I think my own question is about prosecution. So a big problem that as Nigerians we have with the civil service is you hear some of these stories, but then there's no prosecution. So people steal significant amounts of money or commit fraud, But to sack a civil servant, we understand is quite difficult. There's industrial courts and all the rest of that. So my two questions are, one, what is the process being put in place to ensure these people are prosecuted to the full extent of the law, since the monies were obviously missing? And secondly, what is the process to ensure that they are no longer a part of the civil service?
In addition to Yemi's question, and I think the authority...
I told you earlier that one of the routes through which some of these things were happening was that scratch cards, and most of our services then were cash-based. But what we've done now is to ensure that no service is being rendered through cash. You must raise a remitter, you pay to our account in Central Bank, and then you access our service. That has been eradicated, so it's difficult for you to even have access. Even if you're a thief, it will be difficult for you to have access to funds, even if you use the AK-47, except you go to Central Bank where our account is for you to pick the money. Secondly, the public service procedures is clear about disciplinary issues. The staff first must be queried. He must explain himself. After that, he appears before a disciplinary committee. He must be given the opportunity of fair hearing. And you will, if you had followed the story very well, you would have noted that it was at the point of that opportunity of fair hearing that this particular staff confessed that, look, that she is also surprised that the money is not there. That each time she gives the money, she comes and she can't find it. And her house help later confessed that she was the one that, that kind of a thing and that. So those procedures were followed to the latter, because we are also mindful of the fact that if at the end of the day, all we are doing, we've been in the news for whatever reason, and then at the end of the day, such staffs are not really punished, we wouldn't have achieved the aim of what we want to do. We want a system whereby others will see what has happened to these few bad eggs and begin to adjust. Even when they have that intention, they will know that, look, it is no longer business as usual.
Question, and we'll let you go. Wale, you've been itching to ask
the question. I'm going to talk about the kinds of sanctions that you want to mete out to these people, because I overheard Professor Ishak asking them to go in 1 week and produce the money, but you should know that is not realistic. I mean, I don't think these people can provide that money. So it's better you go straight to sanctions and stop asking them to go look for the money, the impossible.
So I think that piggybacks on my question. I've been following the case, so my question again is then what next? So this is fair hearing. They've now said a snake has swallowed the money. Then what happens? What then is the full? And I'm asking so that there's some clarity around what JAMB is doing to prosecute, and also what is the sanction.
In the event that they cannot find this money, so what are they doing?
Even if they find it, they stole it in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Well, Fabian, can you respond to that quickly so that we can move on to other things?
Yes, I didn't really get that last question.
Well, she was asking, what is the next step? What happens next?
You see, we are doing our bit, and at the end of the day, we allow the security agencies to also do their own bit. If you had followed happenings in JAMB of late, you would have noticed that the EFCC chairman even came to the board. He came on a visit unannounced to commend the board for what the board is doing in the area of fighting corruption. Because all that the management is doing is without any prompting from any quarter. But there is a limit to which we can go. We don't have the power to prosecute. Ours is to investigate, expose some of these happenings to the public, and then they will present or submit this stuff to the relevant security agency for probes. But we want to believe that at the end of the day, at least justice will be done, because we've done all the necessary. In fact, there are a lot we've done that is not even out there. A lot that we've done that is not out there. Today is Sunday. Immediately I leave here, I'll be heading towards Buhari, where our office is. We close for the last 6 months. I've been closing 10, 11 p.m. Working with the registrar day in, day out. We are innovating, thinking of how we can block this loophole. We can do this one. It's not all about our staff. I don't want us to narrow this whole thing to JAMB staff and all this. There are a lot that is happening out there. Examination malpractice is a big industry. And if you look at what has been happening in the last 2 months, we just ended our registration, and we are preparing for the mock examination coming up on the 26th of February.
Thank you very much. We'll have to let you go at this point. Thank you very much. That was Dr. Fabian Benjamin, the Public Relations Officer of JAMB, shedding more light on activities in the institution, and particularly the recent audit report that threw up a number of revelations. Now, we've been discussing with Fabian. What are your quick thoughts on the whole thing about strengthening institutions and particularly about what the present registrar of JAMB has been able to do? In 1 year alone, he remitted 8 billion to the accounts. Previously, other registrars 3 million per annum. And he's also trying to plug loopholes. I think that these are important steps.
True, but I think it
commendable.
It should be said within the context of the overall policy of the government. Because I doubt he will have been able to do that on its own if we didn't go to this TSA system, which means all revenues received by public officers have to go to a central account. So that means, which is the point the PRO was making, first reduces access to cash, but secondly, then you can actually see how much the agency is generating. So centrally, exactly. But I think for me, what was most disappointing is, towards the end when we were having the conversation, he couldn't really articulate what next. We're not prosecuting agency, we only give evidence. But you have these people who have supposedly stolen this money and can't produce them. We are then going to hand them over to the police. The police will now do this.
Maybe defining the next steps will not be part of his own brief. You know,
he's a PRO.
No, but there is a board. The process is on.
But what I'm saying, he was talking about processes. So my point, and I will
it
stick
may not be part of his brief to define it.
No. That's my point. The processes should be defined. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, what they say, it may not be part of its own brief to do that on this program.
You're still missing my point. If the processes as if an organization has a sanctioned policy and it's in your handbook.
You know, he left it open-ended. He said they've done their bit, the security agencies will take over from there. What the security agencies will do thereafter, he probably cannot comment on that.
No, I didn't ask him to comment on what the security agents could. He hadn't said that their bit was done and that they've handed over, and as far as that they're done. That's for the fraud case of stealing. As far as the civil service is concerned, there's an employee. What is that process? And I'm asking deliberately because the problem we constantly have in this country with civil servants is there's no clear process of if you are found in error, this gets done, then this gets done, then this gets done. Even he couldn't articulate that clearly, at least for me.
And I think I share your face.
Thank you very much.
Prof, what do you say?
I not only share your viewpoint. The issue is that, look, those who are meant to prevent, acts of serious misconduct, those who are meant to prevent and sanction all those who are engaged in sharp practices, corruption, they are most unfortunately the very people that have been aiding and abetting corruption. I have experienced it as a chief executive. So in this case, look, it is not a big deal for me. If it's the snake swallowing the money today, let the cows come tomorrow and swallow them. As on and so forth. You see, we need to tell ourselves the truth at the end of the day. If, for instance, a governing council will condone people who change examination results, all right? And we complain openly, and nothing happens. Please, then now, what are you talking about?
In the final analysis, maybe what has happened in JAMB is a good development. And if you have every agency of government, engaging in that kind of house cleaning exercise, only God knows the kind of revelations that we will come up with.
See, this is likely to end the Nigerian way.
So what
apart from this noise now, that's the last we hear. And that's
the question she asked the PRO.
They'll just transfer the person from JAMB to WAEC.
And that's
it. As a civil servant concerned.
Well, we hope not. You are watching ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News with me, Reuben Abati. We're going to take a short break. But when we return, we'll be talking about the reorder or the reordering of the election dates. Don't go away. Welcome back to ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Members of the Nigerian Senate, in support of President Muhammadu Buhari, staged a walkout against plans by the Senate to reorder the election dates for 2019. The lawmakers had in January sought to change the dates for the 2019 elections. In the reversed order, the National Assembly elections will hold first, then state houses of assembly and governorship elections, and the presidential elections will hold last. 10 members of the Senate were said to have walked out in protest against the adoption of the report by the Senate and the House of Representatives Joint Committee on the amendment to the Electoral Act. The 10 members had reportedly claimed the amendment was targeted against President Muhammadu Buhari. The report was presented by the chairman of the Senate Committee on the Independent National Electoral Commission with a majority voting in favor of its adoption. Now, this has been very controversial. Those who support the proposal are as passionate as those who are opposed to it. Wale, you must have been following the story as a political editor.
It's an interesting development, especially that the elections are fast approaching. And it is not unexpected that it has taken the slant, I mean the arguments, both for and against. That 9, 10 senators walked out show that the amendment was quite popular because you had the rest, you know, in support of it.
I don't know how many were in.
You could argue that, why not if not? What was wrong with the other one and why this one? I think basically it is political. There is this assumption by the lawmakers that everyone is working ahead of the president's re-election and nobody's factoring their own career into the equation. And now if the president gets re-elected, what happens to them? They will be OYO on their own. So they are doing this to safeguard their own as well as those of the state houses of assemblies, so that the governors too can, you know, can kind of have a kind of relationship, campaign for them. So if you look at it critically, I don't think it's a bad one. It's just that it caught the presidency unawares. And they didn't see this coming. They are literally in trouble, especially that I want to think that the popularity of the president has gone down considerably, you know. So their fears may not be unfounded, actually, because if the presidential election, you know, holds last, then you can't rule out anything. But again, you can tell where they're both coming from, the two sides.
Well, let me come to you, Tereba. Is this actually a plot against the incumbent president?
Well, I cannot speak on behalf of the parliamentarians. You know, I don't know if it's a plot, if it's not a plot. But the key issue of concern, as we once discussed, is after INEC has announced the order of elections, the parliament is attempting to change this sequence. And the whole issue is that since INEC has announced an order, you know, based on existing law, and what's happening in Parliament now is an attempt to change. If they succeed in amending the law, then their own will prevail. They're still debating, people are still working out, and you need the presidents, you need them to, you know, pass the bill.
It's just for the president
and
to
you
sign.
need the president to assent. If the president does assent, then they will supersede, you know, what INEC has attempted to do. So the earlier we resolve it,
can they veto
The president
the president?
They'll come
Of
back
course
to
they
them.
can. That's if the president goes, if he goes to the other side, they
And
will.
it has,
And I read that INEC is also, you know, looking at it as interference, you know, and in court to challenge
I think there was a ruling long ago, about 2009 or thereabouts, which said the National Assembly could not, you know, determine the dates of election, not the order of election. And the National Assembly this time was very careful. It was just the order of election.
Okay.
So and it's within their capacity. to do that.
Yeah, but what is important? Is it the pattern, or really the people's power and, you know, the people's vote, the people's choice, irrespective of how the elections are ordered? Yemi?
Well, the people's votes, the people's pattern, I think historically for us has sort of fed off each other. So people, I mean, on our ballot papers, we have parties. So how a president campaigns affects how a governor campaigns, or affects how a state House of Assembly member or National Assembly member campaigns along party lines. So there's quite a bit tied to that. But I think for me, and I'll differ with Wale on this, yes, without a doubt, National Assembly does have the power to change the order of elections. But I think the order that they are proposing speaks to people that are a bit disconnected from the process of electioneering. We are a country that shuts down on election day, full-on shutdown. In Ghana, people go to work, and they go
everything
to everything normal,
yeah.
and they go to vote. But we shut down. So on every election day, you're mobilizing security forces, you're paralyzing the economy so that people can't exercise their civic responsibility. And the National Assembly of a country now wants us to do that 3 Saturdays. I mean, so I fail to understand the rationale. I agree with Wale that it's...
Isn't that what we've been doing in the past?
And that's what I
No, but 2. We shut it down for 2 Saturdays. 1, we do President and National Assembly. Another, we do Governor and State House of Assembly. So in the National Assembly's proposition, it's not that they grouped executive as one day and legislature as one day, or they grouped federal elections on one day and state elections on one day. You just create 3 days, of which you haven't given us the justification why. But I am looking at it from the perspective of what you then do to an economy over 3 weekends, because usually there's a weekend in between, in a sense, to regroup and realign. So in a sense, we're looking at 6 weeks for Nigeria to conduct elections. That doesn't make any sense to me.
That's on a weekend, not much will be lost. So
6 weeks, it's consecutive. So you're mobilizing
6 weeks
no,
or 3 weeks?
No, because we usually have a week. Look at the dates announced are February 6th. So as of last year, as of Friday, it was exactly 1 year to elections. So it was February 16th and March 2nd, if I'm not mistaken. So there's usually a week in between. For INEC needs to gather itself, security officers.
But what goes on at the time, so?
What do you mean? Which work goes on?
Between.
Are we not in the same country when we have elections? Things are really very slow because you're mobilizing security agencies, you're mobilizing ad hoc staff. Think youth corpers, think facilities, think transportations and the challenges we have of moving, sensitive materials forward, backward.
People having to travel from
one place to the other.
Yemi has a point.
And so for me, I want us to think of it not in terms of 3 weekends.
rather than
Actually,
3
no,
weekends, yeah.
exactly. And not even in terms of 3 weekends, in terms of 6 weekends. Because in a sense, things just really slow down while people are going up and down and that. But and my point is for what? So for me, I haven't heard a clear reason why. So maybe they have one, I haven't heard it.
Yeah, even the spacing that you're talking about also affords the INEC, to properly plan and mobilize for each of the elections.
No,
rather
they
than
need 2
modeling up.
weekends. February 16th and March 2nd. Let us be done.
This spacing will afford INEC better time
Did
to
INEC
plan.
ask you that they need more
No,
time?
but beyond that, you haven't
Did they
responded
ask
to the issue in contention.
Which is?
About whether
The fears.
the presidential election should come first or it should come last.
I
think the way it worked in the past is this concern that if the presidential election comes first, then every other party member who is also running for a position will be compelled to work for the president.
I agree.
And then it works
what I
in
just
favor
said.
of the incumbent.
Yeah.
But in this case, those who are opposed to this new proposed schedule, are saying that, look, once the senators, the governors have all won or lost their positions, there will be no incentive for them to support the incumbent president. He will just be on his own.
So which is what? So you can
So
then
that's
put in
why I then
nuance.
raise the question that what is important? Is it about this PAC, organization, or the popularity of the individual, of the candidate?
Which is what they're trying to sell with this reordering.
Hold on, but I started off with saying that is ideal, but that's the way we vote, and I agree with you. But I'm saying even if you want to change it and move the president, just flip it then. Not create 3 days of elections. I answered you. My own issue is the 3 days. I'm neither here nor there, as you said, with if it's before or after, I really don't care. I'm more particular about the cost to the economy and sort of grinding us to a halt because we want to have elections over 3 weekends.
Anyway, I'm sure we'll continue to have this conversation again and again as Nigeria moves closer to 2019 and the general elections. But I can tell you, Nigerians are so passionate about the coming elections.
Indeed.
And I've seen a lot of people, campaigning and asking Nigerians to go and get their voters card. Because you can only make a difference if you vote and if you have a voter's card.
The spacing is going to do a lot more good.
Going back to that.
Yes, honestly, it's going to do a lot more good than
elections.
Seriously, because those going to
Why can we not? It's a simple.
Anyway,
when you go
we
to
have to
vote,
go.
they
will
give
have
you
to
2 ballot
ride on
papers.
their own.
We can continue this. We can continue this
ballot
conversation.
paper.
It's very interesting, and we can take it up even when we leave the studio. You've been watching ThisDayLive, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Reuben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.